Hey guys, welcome to BP, the Bible Perspective. You know, watching the Sunday coverage of the Democratic Nevada caucus, you think Bernie Sanders is a sure-in for the Democratic nomination. In fact, what is even more amazing is watching the pundits and certain moderators and TV hosts try to corral the thoughts and thinking that is almost a sure lock. I'm going to explain why that is a bad strategy. Now, before we get into it, don't forget to like and share these videos. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a comment or a question, feel free to add it in the comment section. All comments are welcome. Now, when you look at this campaign, there's always, of course, you have what I'm going to refer to as the gatekeepers. Now, gatekeepers in this context simply means those who are, may be, self-appointed or not appointed, but are somewhat the gate to the people. Now, here's the interesting thing. We've always had them. We've always existed. So, like, for example, how do I know about any candidate? Well, I turn on my favorite television program or news program, and I get information from that media source. Of course, that can be good and that can be bad. Of course, it's backed by the Second Amendment, freedom of press. Of course, freedom of press is a great amendment because what it did way back in 1776, when the founding fathers included it in the amendment to the Constitution, was that they didn't want the king or queen or government telling us what information we should have. And in case we don't realize, I think many of us really don't realize how precious of a right that is. There are still countries today, and let's give you an example. China right now is not giving all the information about this virus that's spreading all over the world. And they're holding back certain information. In fact, you could get in trouble if you live in China and you start talking freely to the press. So just to give you context of how precious our freedom of the press is, just look at other nations. Look at the propaganda from other nations, okay? Now, back to our nation, of course, in this primary season. The other side, of course, of the freedom of the press is the kind of information that you're receiving. And oftentimes we think this is good information, but oftentimes if you have whichever side you want to look at, and by the way, both sides are just as bad. You have Fox News and conservative media talking about the mainstream media, the evil mainstream media. When they do, they're just as bad. Here's my point. You have a medium outlet. Like, for example, you're watching me through a camera, and the kind of information that I choose to give you to either favor or disfavor something. In other words, in favor of my point of view, and also I can not give you information or give you information that's going to disfavor or put you out of favor, put you in a bad light with my point of view that I don't agree with. Okay, that's fine. Thank God that we have multiple media platforms. And what is interesting to see in this particular Democratic form is that, as with all elections, you see early on who certain people may want to favor. And in this case, you have certain people, certain media outlets who favor Bernie Sanders, or they favor a woman such as Elizabeth Warren. And sometimes they want that so bad that they would almost do anything to discredit the other. Now, we saw that in the 2016 campaign when Bernie Sanders was burned by the Hillary campaign. That they did some dirty tricks. That's nothing new, by the way. Bush Sr. did that early on in the 80s when Pat Robertson of the CBN, Christian Broadcasting Network, he was running for president, and he actually began to get numbers. He was getting numbers enough to notice. I personally think he was never going to win, but certainly he was getting enough numbers to notice. And so the Bush Sr. campaign did some dirty tricks, tied him to the Jim Baker and the Jimmy Swaggart scandals at the time. Well, one of the interesting things that we see today is the same thing, is that you see where people are, in a subtle way, trying to corral the thoughts of people. Like, for example, I heard this on one of the news media, that people are actually, there was a question actually asked Michael Bloomberg, do you think you should earn that much money? And I thought, wait a minute, the man's worth $61 billion. Legitimately, by the way. In other words, he's not a bootlegger, he's not a gangster, not a drug cartel person. And here you had this news moderator actually asked Michael Bloomberg, does he think he should earn that kind of money? And I thought to myself, that's the stupidest question a person can ask. But it also reflects the idealism in which they operate off of or believe. Now, this same moderator, by the way, was one of the moderators that actually expressed shock that the Fox News or the conservative and Republicans would be dishonest and use dirty tricks. So here's my point. It shows you the naive in which they operate off of in favor of their idealism. In other words, idealism and their view of life oftentimes doesn't square up with reality. For example, you look at all of the candidates and what they do. Bernie Sanders is a socialist. Do people really understand what he's proposing? And more so, how is it going to happen? For example, if Bernie gets his way, what you need to understand is, how is it going to affect your pocketbooks? And that's what you need to understand. Here's another one. He's not running anymore, but Yang, who was running, proposed that you just give every American $1,000 a month. Now just think about that statement for a moment. It may sound nice, especially if you are on the lower end of the economic scale. $1,000 is certainly great. But just think about this practically. You're talking about over $300 billion a month. Where does that money come from? Now, he attempted to explain it, the ifs and all that kind of stuff. If all of the planets align, then you could have $300+ billion a month to just freely give. Okay, Elizabeth Warren just said, well, guess what? I would, in pandering to the transgender community, she said that I would ask a trans person, a student now, transgender student, to interview my Secretary of Education. That's what she said. And based upon the transgender student's recommendation, that's who she would hire as their Secretary of Education. Not a black student, not a woman, not an Indian, but a transgender. That's what she said. That's idealism, people. And it is one that's going to fail. Early on in the election, there were people that were always proposing these, in my opinion, crazy combinations. For example, Oprah and Michelle Obama. Really? That's who you want for president? Why? What has either one of them shown you that they would make them presidential? Now, presidential, I mean that they can make good decisions for the country. Let's keep in mind, idealism aside, that should be the number one thing. What person would be best for the country? One of the reasons why I'm so against Trump is because I think he's a fool in the White House. He's a fool that now has powers, and his decisions reflect that. Remember, he brought us on the brink of war. Why? Because of his foolish mind. We can go on and on and on, but other foolish things. Another interesting thing about the pundency is that you find that people and now they're trying to corral thoughts. And that's interesting because smart campaigners, Bloomberg might be that, even though he did very bad on the debate platform. Keep in mind, there's only one debate, and there's only one platform. Here's the problem, though. The idea is that you see these pundits who are constantly trying to get us to go a certain way. Now, let me mention two previous campaigns, Trump and Barack Obama. I personally believe Trump studied Obama and formulated a winning strategy. Okay, you may disagree with that, but that's fine. But here, we go back to Obama. Obama wasn't accepted at first by the elites, by the party leaders. Neither was Trump, which is always amazing because Trump was a little more ruthless than Obama. Trump bypassed the system and he actually conquered them, beat them down. He humiliated Ted Cruz, right? You look at some of the Republican leaders today, that one of the things that he did when he won, they paraded before Trump and it says bowed the knee and said, "Hail Trump," figuratively, okay? But he humiliated Cruz as a great example. I have no respect for that man because you let that man talk, you let Trump talk about your wife, your father, and then you bow to him. But that's something for the Texas people to deal with. Same thing with Lindsey Graham, right? He once called Donald Trump a kook, a racist, and now sings his praises. So my point is, remember, at first they were against Trump. But here's the interesting thing. Here's always the winning strategy. And this is why what you see with the mainstream media outlets, why they're going to fail, is because of this. They're not in contact with the people. They're more in tune to their ideology. And even now, when people look at Bernie Sanders, it's like, Bernie Sanders, he's a man of the hour. Is he? Is he a man for the people? And by the way, no, he's not. I think he has some kind of crazy ideas. And I don't see how, in the sense that he can stand on the world platform and lead this country and represent this country. And not only that, but I don't even see how he can bring his ideas together. Where is he going to get the capital, the money, the strategy for doing that? The difference in what Obama and Trump did was that they bypassed these elites, by the way, and they went directly to the people. You know, what's kind of interesting today is that with this, by the way, you can bypass any kind of gatekeepers, all right? You could bypass, by the way, let me just sidebar for a moment. We live in a society now that with this and with the media, different things, it used to be, if you want to sell a Hollywood script, you had to go through the Hollywood normal chains of command. If you want to write a book, you have to go through a normal publishing chain of command. Well, the same thing, right? But nowadays, you can bypass that and you can print your own, sell your own. If you want to be a singer, right, you don't have to go through the music industry chain of command. You know, there's ways that you can now produce your own demo tape, get it on play with YouTube and all these other things. But here's my point. My point is, you don't need the gatekeepers per se. And I'm not saying that we should always try to go and buck against the gatekeepers, but you have to also remember that sometimes the gatekeepers don't have you in mind when they're trying to push their agenda. Smart campaigners will go beyond that. Barack energized the people. That's what Trump did. He energized the people. And then the gatekeepers got in line. You know, a lot of the gatekeepers during Barack's run stuck with Hillary until the very end. And then finally, they had to get aboard. So my whole point is, when I look at some of this coverage and I see, oh my God, some of the ideals that they're talking about, looking at some of the in my opinion, nonsense, okay? I'm looking for a person who's going to speak directly to me, not through them, because they're not sounding that good. All right, guys, that's my perspective. And as always, remember, like and share this video, and subscribe to BP The Bible Perspective. I'll see you next time.